Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Following talks between Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski and his Ukrainian counterpart Andriy Sybiha, signals are beginning to emerge, which point towards a potential de-escalation of the diplomatic row of a wartime history, which had strained bilateral relations in recent weeks. While the dispute is not over yet, important questions remain as to how to avoid similar situations and whether Moscow could have an interest in widening the rift instead. Joining us here today is Krzysztof Jaworski, Deputy Director at the Institute for Security and International Development. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
So let's cut straight to the chase. As the relations are beginning to be mended, there are diplomatic talks ongoing, right? The process has already begun. Do you think that Vladimir Putin would have an interest in destroying all this by conducting perhaps some sort of operation under a false flag, which would put the blame on Ukraine, an operation on the Polish soil?
This will be a speculation, but based on the previous information which were revealed by Polish special services regarding the activity of Russian services at our territory, one of the factors which were constant in it was that Russian services tried to use, instead of Russian national citizens, Ukrainian citizens to conduct acts of sabotage. And why is that? It is because it is additional profit for the Russian services, because there is not only a potential act of sabotage, but also a very useful information for the propaganda, for disinformation. So, in my opinion, based on this previous informations, on these previous cases, it will be not only possible but also plausible for Russians to try to make some provocations, some acts of sabotage which could further deepen the emotions regarding the ongoing dispute between Poland and Ukraine.
But we're bringing this up on the basis of recent articles which appeared in the press, both Polish and foreign, concerning possible Russian provocations, possible military activities, perhaps trying to conduct what they refer to as a horizontal escalation. Because it's not really going very well for Russia on the front line, right? We're seeing that its operations have floundered, we're seeing burning refineries. So do you think that Putin will be trying to seek an avenue to divert attention to a different conflict instead in this way?
It is one of the possible ways for Putin to act and to try to achieve his goals. And well, look at this in this manner. We have the stalemate regarding the war effort in Ukraine, and the further adding resources to this effort, to this war effort on Russian side, is not so effective, because Ukrainians right now have at least three advantages vis-à-vis Russia. It is short-range drones regarding the FPV drones, and this is the advantage which helped stopping this slow but constant advance of Russian military.
Widening the kill zone, right?
Yes, that's right. Also, Ukrainians created the advantage regarding the short-range drones, which helps in hitting the logistics, the supplies for Russian army, and also increasing the costs for Russian army, and also long-range drones, which helps hitting the energy infrastructure. And each additional month of such a situation is making these costs for Russia higher. So maybe it will be wise for them to try to find another way. And such escalation regarding the NATO countries, it will be the calculation that such attack would make NATO countries lower the support for Ukraine. But it's a risky deal, it's a risky bet for Russians, because at the same time such attack can make the very opposite effect and
galvanize the public opinion.
Yes,
right?
that's right.
Show them, okay, we're fighting the same war right now, so we're in this together. That would be the message, wouldn't it?
Yes, and from this assumption we can also make the conclusion regarding how to effectively deter such Russian move. It's to make them believe that such move would only galvanize our support for Ukraine, would only make us harder against Russia. So it will be the deterrence by denial, by denying them this goal that they would like to achieve by such move.
Well, that's a crucial question, because if we're talking about an open provocation, like, an incursion by a number of troops, another example that was described in the article, a helicopter landing on NATO territory and then Russia staging a rescue effort, right? That would be pretty much clear to everyone. This is a Russian incursion. But would the same approach of deterrence work vis-à-vis a false flag operation, say a terrorist attack conducted by Russian operatives, and later on Russia basically planting fabricated evidence pointing towards Ukraine instead? How to deter something like that?
Yes, that's also an interesting question, and also I would go back to my first answer regarding these previous cases. They were rather low profile because a single act of sabotage, single people from Ukraine who were hired for it. Some of these acts were indeed effective. Some were stopped by our services before even conducting this act. It was rather low profile, and it didn't create like unified response from the politicians, from the media. It was too less of significance to put enough effort at emphasizing what was the mechanics between.
Was it only because of lack of casualties so far?
Yes, of course. And if we imagine that there will be a bigger act, the act from your question, the potential false flag operation, the potential provocation, in my opinion, and it's on our advantage, there will be the unified reaction. There will be a lot of effort to explain who is behind that and to attribute this activity to Russian side. So that's why, in my opinion, it's not so easy for Russians to use this tool and to gain their goals. And that's why, in my opinion, it's not so probable that they will do it.
Robert, we're in a very specific situation right now, and this leads us into the conversation concerning Polish-Ukrainian relations. Had this happened, let's say, 2 years ago, most people would agree this is not going to be effective because Poland and Ukraine are on the same side. But right now there are politicians, there are commentators who think, no, they're not, because there are historical differences. There is this blame game, like who started it? Was it because of President Zelensky's decision to allow the naming of the military unit after the Ukrainian, organization responsible for these crimes during World War II? Was it because Poland overreacted? It's still ongoing, this discussion, but we do have a rift. It wasn't there before. So do you think that there is, unfortunately, a window of opportunity for Russia to widen it instead?
I would agree that it makes this more possible for Russians to calculate that they could achieve their goals by such tools. At the same time, I will also keep in mind these arguments I made in the previous answer regarding the fact that well, it's not so easy to make us believe in something. We have also our information policy, we have our media, our politicians, our signaling.
But we also do have,
yes.
we have political parties and groups which would immediately, latch onto this narrative and say, you see, this is because of Ukrainians. We need to end the war. We cannot be drawn into it, and so on. Right?
Yes, that's
and they're
right.
rising in popularity, unfortunately.
Yes, that's right. And of course, it's impossible to change mind of everyone for each of sides. So, in my opinion, still public opinion will understand that such provocation is made by Russians. But of course, the problems you mentioned, they are real and they require effort. They require constant work on explaining, on signaling. So the question is, of course, open, because we would never know how this very complex social opinion mechanics works until they are tested.
So do you think the diplomatic row is going to be over soon? Do you think that we're entering a cool-down period and methods will be devised to avoid similar disputes in the near future, disputes over history? What would need to happen?
Well, that's the great question about the sources of this current dispute, and most of analysis points toward internal affairs in Ukraine. Zelensky's calculation was about galvanizing support for himself inside Ukraine, and he miscalculated regarding the reaction of Polish side. That's why now there are some steps back, and also there is this approach toward calming down the dispute.
Right. Could you really have believed that Poland's going to ignore this? I mean, the Ukrainian insurgent army, that's a household name. Pretty much everyone in Poland knows what they did during World War II, right?
That's right. That's of course right. But at the same time, I think that Rewiński, his style of maintaining politics is really, well, let's call it this way, aggressive. He's pushing, he's trying, he's betting, and he had a rather good effect as for now. And of course, that's understandable. He is the leader of the country which is under the existential threat, which is under war. But at the same time, the reaction from the Polish side was much harder than it used to be.
Especially from the presidential side, right?
Yes, that's right. It was a very hard reaction. In my opinion, this reaction had this disadvantage of being unelastic. You cannot scale the pressure regarding the taking back the order. It's not a tool of politics which allows you to pressure more, pressure less, to bargain, to negotiate.
So do you think the government is trying to restore some of this flexibility now by offering an off-ramp from this dispute?
Yes, I think so. And also, if we look at this from the Polish perspective, we still have to keep in mind the priorities. The top priority is the security. The historical question is also important and we cannot abandon it, but it couldn't be made with the harm for the top priority, that is security. And we kept this balance. Also, in my opinion, that's part of the reason why I think that Ukrainian side miscalculated, because they had really loyal ally in Poland for all these years. And right now, for example, we can hear that Prime Minister Tusk is saying that we should be cautious regarding the further pledging of aid for Ukraine before NATO summit.
Well, that's a different language, right? Although he said that this is also because of our unique role on the eastern flank. But, you know, you've mentioned domestic politics in Ukraine, but we also have an indication this could still be a factor in Poland. A poll carried out by onet.pl, one of the major information websites in Poland, suggests that 42.6% say that the president was right in his approach to Ukraine, whereas the government was supported by 32.5%, with, of course, 14.6% saying that they do not support either, and for about 10% saying that they are not interested. But still, one can see that the confrontational approach actually won in this poll. What do you think is going to influence further decisions here in Poland?
Yes, I think that public opinion should be inevitably taken into consideration, because we are a democratic country, and finally politicians will have to refer to public opinion in their own well-understood interest.
Even against national interests or security interests?
Unfortunately, I think that's how it works in democracies from time to time. Of course, democracies will act in this security or national interest, but only under the direct pressure, only when it's very visible, this threat. But right now, of course, if we look in the long term, we see this national interest of Poland, but in the short term, there is no such visible pressure which could be so obvious for public opinion.
Isn't that playing with fire? I mean, a visible pressure would mean perhaps one of these provocative acts that we've mentioned at the very outset.
Yes, that's right. And also, I think what we could tell based on this public opinion poll is that it's Ukraine who needs Poland more than Poland needs Ukraine. And the public opinion understands it, and that's why public opinion in Poland do not understand why Rewiński, under such pressure in the situation in which Poland is helping, is still making such moves which could be well, problematic for us, which makes us react. And that's also the factor, I think, which should be taken into consideration in this calculation on the Ukrainian side.
Krzysztof Jaworski was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you very much.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Stay with us for more latest news, updates and commentary.